I often read stories on the internet. I think it's because they're free and some of them are really interesting. Lately, I've especially enjoyed stories about unfaithful spouses. I am also attracted to stories where heroes take revenge and restore justice. I love stories, but not ones where the husband acts like a weakling. You see, I myself recently realized that I have been a weakling for the last 7 years. That's how long I've been married. I used to think it was out of love for Susan and wanting to do anything for her. I now realize that I did what she wanted just to avoid conflict. Believe it or not, I learned a lot about myself from reading stories about unfaithful wives. I couldn't believe that the husbands in these stories never suspected anything. Did they live in the Stone Age? Looking back, I realized that for almost our entire life together, Susan had been using me and taking me for a fool. We met in college. I was in my last year, and she was in her second year. She was a beautiful woman, and I was something of a nerd. At one of the parties, I drank some beer and was able to approach her. When I asked her to dance, she agreed. We started talking. I used one of those corny phrases. "What is a beautiful girl like you doing in a place like this?" I admitted that I'm a nerd and don't date often. She laughed and said I was pathetic, but still agreed to dance with me. We both drank too much, and she told me that she broke up with her ex-boyfriend 2 days ago and just wanted to have fun. Her friend told her about this party, and she came. We both ended up getting drunk and having sex. I left my baseball cap on the doorknob so my neighbor wouldn't disturb us. This was the first time I used this trick. Usually, it was my neighbor who found himself a girlfriend. When she woke up, she didn't look too pleased with herself. I pointed to the bathroom, and she went to take a shower. After the shower, she was a little friendlier. She truly was a beautiful woman. Looking at the two of us, hardly anyone would have thought that we were a couple. I made her breakfast before taking her back to the dorm. I asked if I could see her again, to which she replied that she was not ready to date again, but if she saw me at parties, she would not turn away. Looking back, I think it was her way of saying I wasn't right for her. Sometimes I saw her at other parties, but she hung out with her girlfriends and danced with other guys. Why not? She was beautiful and free. She danced with me when I asked her. I didn't know if she liked me or if she was just being polite. I grew up in a good family where good family values were instilled. The problem is that I forgot about them in college. I went to parties and got drunk often. Besides Susan, I had relationships with other girls in college. Unfortunately, they took place at parties where sex was available for the price of admission. Girls agreed to have sex with anyone just to get to the party. I think it was a way to have sex without resorting to prostitutes. I wanted a girlfriend, but nerd girls didn't go to parties. I put sex before commitment. I was miserable, and my roommate noticed. Tony DeMarco was a nice Italian guy from New York who came to our college because of the excellent computer science program. We became good friends. He wasn't as shy as me, but we helped each other with our studies. You could say we were like brothers. Tony made sure I was invited to parties where I had a chance to get girls. He had connections. That's what I call a friend. Our relationship was finally strengthened when Tony slipped on the steps one day after class. He fell backwards and his head hit the concrete. I remembered the story about how a person can swallow his tongue and knew what to do. Once his airways were clear, his lungs sucked in air and his complexion began to return to normal. At that moment, I realized that I was close to tears, thinking that my best friend could have gotten hurt. His eyes opened and he saw that I was holding his head, my face distorted with excitement. "Mark, what happened?" "Don't worry, Tony. Everything will be fine. Just a little problem with the language." "What?" "Well, help me get up. I'm fine." When the paramedics finished examining Tony, they said he was fine, and we headed back to the dorm. As we approached the entrance of the building, Tony stopped when he saw a long limousine parked nearby. The driver stood next to him, opening the back door. Tony shrugged and walked over to the limousine. As he approached, the driver opened the door and his father came out. Angelo DeMarco was an imposing figure 6 feet tall, weighing about 100 kilograms, with a wide smile. He hugged Tony, relieved that his son was okay. "Dad, this is Mark, Tony began. "I know who he is," Angelo smiled. "Mark, I am in your debt for saving my son. If you ever need help, contact me. Don't forget I'm serious. At any time." 5 minutes later, Tony left back for New York, leaving me to wonder if I'd ever had a real friend. Then I met Susan my senior year. After that incident, we sometimes met on campus, and she was always kind to me. I think at the time I thought she might have feelings for me. I decided to ask her out again, and she agreed. This time she seemed a little different than before, not as carefree as at parties. We went to dinner and a movie. She actually held my hand and smiled at me. After that, we had sex again, this time in the car. I thought she must be taking pills. At least we weren't drunk this time. I asked her if she wanted to meet next week, and she said yes. Looks like I have a girlfriend. We dated for the next few weekends, and one day she said we had a problem. "Mark, I'm pregnant. You are the only man I've been with. What are we going to do?" I was shocked. I was taught from childhood to do the right thing, although I felt that Susan was using me. I was so stupid that I just gave in because of sex. Looks like now it's time to pay the bills. I was due to graduate in a month, and I already had a job in my father's office, which dealt with insurance. I took business courses to get my insurance agent license. Susan was raised by her grandparents. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Her grandparents promised to help her with her education. She wanted to become a legal secretary. This is where the serious business begins. I was for women's right to choose, but at the same time I was against getting rid of pregnancy. It would be difficult for me to kill my own child. It's probably different when the decision is made by someone else. "Let's get married," I said. "I have a good job starting in a month, and you can continue your education. You can take a semester off when the baby is born. We can handle it. I love you and I want this baby." Although I wasn't sure that I really loved her, I wanted to do the right thing. Another option would have been to pay for the procedure, but I really didn't want to do that. I doubted that she loved me, but we agreed to get married. I wrote a letter to my parents and told them that I was going to get married after graduation. I told them that Susan, whom they had never met, was pregnant, but we loved each other and were going to get married. I mentioned that my father owns an insurance agency. In fact, his business was a little bigger. He was also involved in real estate and auctions. We weren't rich, but we lived pretty well. Susan and I got married a month after I graduated. We invited her grandparents to the wedding. They really turned out to be nice people and were happy for Susan and me. They thanked me for doing right by Susan. They spoke to me privately for a few minutes. "Mark, we know Susan can be a little wild and stubborn. We did everything we could. As you've probably noticed, she gets angry when she doesn't get what she wants." The truth was that I didn't really know anything about her. We got drunk, had sex, and a couple of months later, we started dating. I soon found out that she was pregnant. I thought she realized she was pregnant and got scared. So she started dating me. We got along well, and she decided that I was her way out of a difficult situation. But she's a beautiful woman. She has a pleasant personality, and as I later found out, she is a great actress. My parents liked her, and she always tried to help when she was around them. We rented a nice 3-room house with the option to buy it within a year. It seemed to me that everything was fine with us. The sex was great, especially in the first couple of years. After the birth of her child, Susan took 1 semester off, which lasted only 10 weeks. She transferred to a college that was just a few miles away. She could go there without any problems. My mom looked after our daughter trying to how Susan was studying. I was happy with my job. I sold insurance and real estate. Sometimes he helped at auctions, but he could never be an auctioneer. This was done by my father and his employee Bob. I didn't know how other married couples behaved because I only lived with my parents. But it seemed to me that they were closer to each other than Susan and I. Our first 2 years of marriage were like this. I worked and Susan studied. In the evenings, we stayed at home with Trina. We watched TV and Trina played on the floor. Maybe twice a week we had sex. It was good. I never remember her complaining. Susan took the pills after Trina was born. We didn't want any more children at that time. Everything seemed normal until Susan graduated. I asked her if she wanted to work in our office, but she said she wanted to work in a law firm doing accounting or being a secretary. She achieved her goal. She was hired by a large law firm as a receptionist. I thought the extra income would be useful, but Susan spent all the money on herself. Don't get me wrong, I made enough to provide for everything we needed. But once Susan started getting paid, everything we had didn't seem good enough to her. She needed a new car. Of course, he had to be athletic. Then she began to find fault with furniture and household appliances. I told her I wouldn't change everything at once. If she wants everything new, then let her pay for it herself. She was stubborn and got her way, just like her grandparents said. She hasn't had sex with me for over a month. In the end, I gave in like a weakling, agreed to pay for half of the new furniture and equipment. I never saw a penny of her income. I didn't even know how much she earned. When it came time to file our taxes, she said her bosses advised us to file separately. Since they were lawyers, I followed her lead. I later found out that they never told her this. She just didn't want me to know how much she made. She bought all her clothes herself. And I must say, her closet was full of things. Some outfits were too short or too sexy for the office, but as soon as I raised this issue, an argument would immediately begin. It had been no more than 6 months since she started working, and she stated that she needed to spend time with her friends. She needed me time. Now, every Friday evening, I knew that she was somewhere with her friends. She usually returned by midnight. I had no problems with this. I played golf twice a week, so I had no right to complain. When the golf season ended, I joined the bowling club with the other agents in our office. My father's business was our sponsor. Our days went something like this until Trina went to school. Susan prepared her clothes every night, and I always got up with Trina and we had breakfast together. I drove her to school. I picked her up after class if I didn't have meetings, otherwise my mom took her to her place. For a while until one of us could take her. Over time, I began to notice that Susan and I were becoming increasingly distant from each other. It happened gradually, but I saw the gap growing between us. She never liked my friends, although she always behaved politely when meeting them. Behind their backs, she called them nerds, losers, and other nasty names. She had her own circle of friends, and it was them who she invited to visit us to play cards and just spend time. I always played the role of a good husband, trying to avoid quarrels. I didn't like her friends either. They were like in college, conversations about sex, and parties always involved alcohol. I felt that at these parties some of the men behaved too freely with Susan. If I told her about it, she just laughed at me. To be honest, I was often the butt of jokes at these meetings. Susan began to stay late at work more and more often. During this period, Trina and I became real best friends. She trusted me and told me about everything that happened at school. Every evening I helped her with her homework, although it was not much, and she loved to study. I attended school meetings and supported her in all her endeavors. Susan continued to be nice to Trina when she was home. She called her darling and sweetheart, but Trina most of all wanted her mother to be close. Whenever Trina mentioned some school event that she wanted her mom to come to, Susan always made the excuse that she needed to work to help support the family. Our marriage was approaching 7 years, and I was increasingly spending my evenings on the internet after I put Trina to bed. I started reading stories about unfaithful wives, one after another, and soon I began to understand that Susan had been behaving exactly like the heroines of these stories for several years. I couldn't figure out, was I just being paranoid or was Susan really cheating on me? There was no doubt left. I lived with an unfaithful wife. She was a great actress, but now I began to notice warning signs like conversations on the phone that she would quickly end or change the subject when I entered the room. She always deleted messages and cleared the call log on her phone regularly. I noticed that after nights out with her friends, she always washed her clothes. especially her underwear, the next day. There were many other small details that I read about in the stories. She never wanted to have sex after returning from parties. If I was away for a meeting, Trina would often spend the night at my parents' place. I thought about hiring a private investigator like they did in the stories, but I realized that in our state, everything is divided equally in a divorce, so there was no point. Besides, I couldn't afford it. My main concern was Trina. She was the reason I stayed with Susan. If we got divorced, I might not see Trina as often as I wanted. She was the meaning of my life. Susan began to spend time with friends more and more often. She found any excuse to leave the house. Sometimes I went with her, but I never liked it. She often flirted with other men, as if to provoke me. She seemed to enjoy watching me react. Over time, I began to realize that I was not good enough for Susan. The things we owned seemed worse to her than her friends. We still had sex, but it didn't happen more than once a month. She was no longer interested in it. I felt that she was doing this out of pity for me. I stayed with her for Trina, and now I realized that it was a mistake. Everything collapsed in one day. I returned home a day early from a business trip. This time I decided to do as I read in the stories and did not call Susan in advance. It was evening when I arrived. An unfamiliar car was parked in the yard. I got out of the car, quietly walked up to the house, and opened the door with my key. The light was on in the living room, but there was no one there. I heard sounds coming from our bedroom. I was angry but not surprised when I saw it was Brad. He managed the fitness center that Susan attended. He always flirted with her, and this time he was caught red-handed. By the way, Brad had a wife named Jill who worked as a model. She mostly did face and hand commercials, but she had an amazing figure. She wasn't one of those skinny models that walk down the runway. Why does a man cheat with a woman who is barely a 7 when he has a 10 at home? I had known Jill for some time, and she was one of the few people I liked in Susan's circle. "What the hell?" I shouted. "What are you doing here? You should have called before you came." "Well, now you know everything. Get out of the room so we can get dressed," Susan said. "Should I call Jill and invite her here?" I said sarcastically. "If you tell Jill, I'll cut your face open, you weakling," Brad threatened. I stood in the room and realized that he was right. Brad could beat me. But at least I had to fight back. I thought, what's the point? I'll just get punched in the face and Susan will enjoy it. I left the room and heard them muttering something as they closed the door behind them. Brad came out first. "Listen, you weakling. I'm serious about Jill. If she finds out, it won't be good for you, understand, freak? Just get out of my house," was all I could say. He came up to me, pressed me against the wall, clenched his fist and laughed. Then he turned and left. I stood there like a real weakling. Susan came out next and stared at me. "Well, now you know everything. I tried to hide it, but I knew that one day you would find out," she said. "I want a divorce. Tomorrow I will start filling out the documents. It would be better for you to leave," I replied. She looked at me and laughed. "You will not divorce me. You have little guts. Besides, I'll get half of everything you have. You won't be able to afford it. And yet, you will lose your precious daughter. What are you going to tell her?" "I'll tell her the truth, that her mother is a cheating woman of easy virtue, and that we are getting a divorce. Trina is a smart girl, she can handle it. You're already gone half the time. I won't go anywhere, and you won't force me. I advise you to move into the guest room if you don't want to sleep with me," Susan replied. I left the house and went to pick up Trina. I needed to talk to her and tell her the truth. I wanted to keep it a secret, but I couldn't stay with her mother. I picked her up from school and took her to the pizzeria to talk. "Trina, I need to tell you something. It's about your mom and me." "You mean you're getting a divorce, right, Dad?" she asked. "Yes, but I wanted to talk to you so you wouldn't get too upset. Sorry, honey, but Mom and I can't be together anymore." "You found out she cheated on you, didn't you, Daddy? I knew about it for a while and tried to hide it from you, but I knew that someday you would find out. Can I live with you, Daddy?" said Trina. "What? You knew your mom was having an affair, but you didn't tell me? I don't understand, I told her. Dad, I love you and I didn't want you to get hurt. I decided that as long as you don't find out, it won't hurt you. Although she was only 7 years old, she was smart. You mean you didn't tell me that you knew your mom cheated on me because you didn't want me to get hurt? How long have you known about this? I asked. I've known it since I saw her with Uncle Joe a few months ago. I was hoping it was a one-time thing with him, but later I saw her with Warren, what's his name, the guy from the grocery store. And she was too close to her friends when we went to parties. I'm sorry, Daddy, but I knew that someday you would find out about this. I would like it to happen later than sooner. My God, my sweet little daughter knew her mom was having an affair, but didn't tell me because she didn't want to hurt me. I didn't want to ask her, but I needed to know how she even knew about her mother. Uncle Joe wasn't really an uncle. Trina only called him that because her mother told her to do so out of respect. Darling, your mother probably didn't do anything in front of you, I asked. No, Daddy, you were on a trip, and I was at my friend Stacy's down the street. I came home to get my bike. I looked in and saw Uncle Joe kissing Mom, so I left quietly. Are you sure, Trina? Mom never knew I was there, and I was afraid to tell you. I knew it would hurt you. What about Warren? What did you see? I heard my mother talking to him on the phone. She said his name. She told him that I would go to my grandmother later. Just before we left, I was getting my overnight bag ready when he walked in. He grabbed Mom and gave her a kiss. She didn't know I saw them. She told him that he would have to wait until later when I left. When I left the bedroom, he simply smiled at me, thanked his mother, and left. When the next morning Grandma dropped me off, he was still there and acted like he forgot to bring milk or something. Dad, I may be young, but I'm not stupid. I wasn't sure whether to be angry or smile after her statement. I just knew it was over between me and Susan. I didn't care about the cost. When we returned home, Trina barely spoke to her mother. She answered any question that was asked of her, but otherwise said nothing. The next morning, I took Trina to school and then went to see John, my lawyer. He told me that Susan was right and that our assets would be divided equally. We had a couple of surprises that Susan didn't know about. I asked John to arrange a quick hearing so I could get Susan out of the house. Under no circumstances did I want to be in the same house with her. On the way home, I stopped by my mom's and asked if Trina could stay with her for a few days. I told her that Susan and I were getting a divorce and I didn't want Trina to be in the middle of it. Mom told me to take as much time as I need. I told her that I would come to Trina every evening. When I got home, Susan came in and told me her demands. She wanted everything she could get, plus a huge alimony payment. She even asked for alimony. How stupid could she be? I thought she hadn't told her lawyer the whole truth. I didn't say a word to her. I just went to bed. The next day, my lawyer, John, informed me that he had scheduled a custody and living arrangements hearing for Monday. When I got home that evening, Susan said, "How stupid can you be? You're going to make a fool of yourself by saying I cheated on you." Yes, I received the documents at work. You have no proof, you're an asshole, you're just making yourself look stupid. Again, I didn't argue with her, although I wanted to kick her in the ass. I wanted custody of Trina, and if I abused Susan, it wouldn't look good. On Monday, we went to the judge's chamber. I picked Trina up from school and took her with me. Susan had her lawyer with her. John, my lawyer, met us there. "What is Trina doing here?" asked Susan. "She's involved in a divorce. She should have a say in where she lives," I replied. "This is nonsense. Children should be with their mother," Susan objected. "Well, I guess we'll let the judge decide," was all I said. We all entered his chambers. "This is not a divorce decree, but a hearing," the judge said. "We are here to decide who gets what and where they live. If everyone agrees, this can be stated in your divorce papers. If not, then we will follow my decision until the trial takes place, at which all the evidence is presented and decisions are made." The judge asked Trina to wait in the lobby. He'll talk to her in a few minutes. She stood up and quietly left the room. She appears to be a very well-mannered young lady, the judge said. It's a shame you couldn't figure it out. Susan almost grinned at me. Thank you, Judge. I'm trying my best, Susan replied. Damn it, she should be an actress. I just sat and was silent, deciding not to argue. Susan's lawyer gave the judge his papers asking for Trina's custody. $150 a week in child support for Trina and another $100 a week in child support. She asked for the house and its contents, knowing that she would only be able to get half the price of the house. The judge looked at her paperwork and mentioned that it was a no-fault divorce and everything was being split in half. This caused Susan to smirk at me again, believing that she would get what she wanted. Then the judge looked at me. Mr. Royer, you have filed a request for an early hearing with the court. What are your grounds for divorce? Adultery judge, she had affairs behind my back. I don't want my daughter to know about this. Susan screamed. You can't prove anything. You're pathetic. Go ahead. Give the judge the photos or phone records. Maybe you have a video. You don't have any evidence. These are nothing more than your rumors. The judge told Susan to calm down, looked at me, and asked if I had such evidence. Sir, I have an eyewitness to 2 events. My daughter Trina saw her mother cheating. You're a liar, Susan shouted. Trina was never around. How can you use our daughter like this? Susan must not have noticed her slip of the tongue, but her lawyer did. He asked Susan to calm down. The judge stood up. I'm going to talk to the girl alone in the hall. I want to see what she has to say. About 10 minutes later, he returned to his chambers. She's a very sweet young girl. We had a nice chat, and I believe her, but I have a few questions for Mrs. Royer. He told her what to say. Susan said, I would never do anything to harm my daughter. He made it all up. Mrs. Royer, your daughter mentioned Uncle Joe. Do you know this person? Asked the judge. Yes, he is a family friend, but just a friend. I never did anything with it, Susan replied. Can you tell me if there is a way for your daughter to know that he has a skeleton and crossbones tattoo on his back? If necessary, we can subpoena him. Oh my God, she was never there. She couldn't see it. She would have told me, Susan replied. She told me, Susan. She said she saw you and Joe when she came back to get the bike. She also saw you with Warren. The reason she never told you is because you are never around. Besides, what do you expect from her? I remarked. The judge made his decision. Mr. Royer, you will receive custody of your daughter Trina, but Mrs. Royer will have liberal visitation rights. The house and all its contents will be valued and divided equally. John, my lawyer, spoke up. Sir, a company came to us and took an inventory of the contents and its current value. The house was worth $120,000, but we owed $70,000, and the net worth was $50,000. The contents were valued at $30,000. This brought our total capital to $80,000. This also included 2 of our cars. Is that all? Susan exclaimed. I bought this furniture and my car myself. They cost a lot more. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Royer. No one wins in a divorce. Mr. Royer, you will get the house and all its contents, but you will have to pay Mrs. Royer $30,000, and each of you will be able to keep your car. Or we will have to auction everything and split the proceeds after paying off the debts. I noticed that there was no question of saving. What, he gets a house? It's not fair. I bought all this furniture with my own money, Susan said. It doesn't matter who bought what during the marriage. There was no prenuptial agreement, so everything is divided down the middle. They offer him a house because he has a daughter. The most important thing here is her. Her friends and surroundings are important to her, Mr. Royer. Is there any possibility of you getting $30,000 for half of Mrs. Royer's estate? Asked the judge. Yes, sir. I can borrow them from my parents and pay them back. I'm sure the banks won't lend any of us money at this time until this divorce is final. Mrs. Royer, one last thing. I noticed that you and Mr. Royer have about the same income. I was surprised to hear this. So, since you believe that $150 a week is fair alimony, you will pay it to Mr. Royer. You will have 3 days to vacate the premises, and you can only take your personal belongings. This is unfair. Why should I pay him? It's not my fault he's weakling. I just shook my head. The judge spoke for the last time. If any of you want to challenge this divorce and the agreement I put together, you are more than welcome. Mrs. Royer, his evidence is more than enough to obtain custody, and the division of the share will likely stand. I walked out into the lobby and hugged Trina. I know she loved her mother, and it will be hard for her, but we will get through this. Susan was very angry with the judge's decision. She thought about fighting, but her lawyer said she had little chance of winning. I think what she hated most was having to pay me $150 a week in child support. I admit, this surprised me a little. My father lent me money to pay off Susan. I promised that I would return his money. Every week when the court sent me money from Susan, I gave it to my father. I made more than enough to live on, and with Susan out of the picture, I even had some money to save. Life was pretty good, except for Susan pestering her. Trina told me that during the weekends she spent with her mother, she was constantly asked about me. Trina told me that her mom apologized for what she saw. I think she did respect Trina a little, or was still acting like a good mother. After a couple of months, Susan started making excuses for why she couldn't take Trina. Either she worked late or was on business trips. Supposedly, she became a secretary for a couple of lawyers. She won't tell me anything else. I figured she had done some work on her back. I didn't care as long as she didn't do it in front of Trina. One day, my dad called me to the office. He told me that he had a surprise for me. I walked in and saw an old friend. It was Samantha. We always called her Sam. When I was about 12 years old, Sam came to live with us as a foster child. She was 14 at the time. Her parents were caught selling illegal substances and sent to prison. Mom and Dad were asked to auction off their house and belongings. That's when they met Sam. She was going to live in a kindergarten when her mother asked to become her foster parent. Most people raise young children, but my parents saw something special in Sam. She stayed with us until she entered the service when she finished her studies. I really liked her and missed her when she left for work. She was kind of a tomboy and didn't take crap from anyone. I know she loved my parents just by her actions. Whenever they asked her for something, she never gave them a word. Several guys were hitting on me, and I saw her hit one another. She told them that if they ever hit on me again, she would kick their ass. I will say that they were 2 classes above me. I doubt I would have had a chance. That's probably when I realized that I was a weakling. I was quite smart and helped Sam with her homework. She was like an older sister to me. In a way, I think I loved her, but I never told her about it. I hugged her when she left. Even tears came to my eyes. She was back home on vacation, and I was at college. It was the first time I saw her in 10 years. She looked good. It's hard to describe. Long blonde hair, a handsome figure as far as I could tell, and a big dimpled smile. She hugged me tightly. Dad said he hired her to be our new secretary. I remember years ago, he told her that if she needed anything to let him know. Now that she had left the service, she was looking for a job. She said she spent her early years fighting, but her last few years overseas, working mostly with computers and electronics. During our divorce, it was so nice to see Sam's smiling face every morning. One thing I might add here is that Susan and Sam never cared about each other from the day they met. I remember Susan saying she thought Sam was weird. In fact, she said she wondered if she was gay since she wasn't actually dating. How did she know if Sam was dating or not? She must be being followed or something. I knew that a couple of divorced agents had asked Sam out on a date, but she had respectfully declined. She did not tell anyone about her personal life. Sam, on the other hand, told me that she enjoys studying people and doesn't think Susan is trustworthy. Mark, I care about you. I don't want to tell you how to live, but don't trust her. I didn't trust Susan. I caught a rumor that she was still having sex even during the breakup. It really made me look bad, but I had to do my best to make sure there was no chance of losing Trina. Dad invited Trina and me to Sam's homecoming party on Saturday. When we arrived, I introduced Trina to Sam. They got along well together for a long time. Trina never left her side the entire time we were there. I think they both made a new friend. It turns out that when Trina met Sam, they had an instant connection. Sam leaned over, talking to Trina. I knew Trina like that. Halloween was approaching, so Sam asked Trina what she was going to wear from trick or treat. Trina told her she probably wouldn't be able to go outside this year. She said her mom said she had to work late and couldn't take her with her. On Halloween, young children dress up in costumes and go door to door to their neighbors and get candy. Previously, it was believed that if a treat was not given, then a joke was played on the one who did not give it. There aren't many giveaways these days, and neighbors who want to take part leave their porch lights on. Sam looked at me, waiting for an explanation. I usually give candy to the neighborhood kids, and Susan used to take Trina door to door. This year, she said she needed to work. I guess she doesn't feel obligated to divorce. Later, I told Sam the truth. Susan was going to the Halloween party herself. Sam was very infuriated that her mother put herself above her daughter. Sam, Susan always puts herself first, I explained. Trina, Sam said, would you like me to take you to trick or treat? I'll put on my uniform and go with you. Trina couldn't be happier. She told Sam that she was going to dress up like a princess because her dad always called her princess. This was another moment that showed me what a wonderful person Sam is. I wondered why Susan couldn't be as good. Susan often came to our house under the pretext that she had forgotten something. I think she was testing me. It didn't help her at all because I remained the same weakling. When Susan found out that Sam would be accompanying Trina to Halloween, she was furious. Trina and I deserve a normal life too. Go to your damn party. Sam and I will make sure Trina goes to see Trick or Treat. I couldn't wait for the divorce to be final. After this, there will be no reason for me to let Susan into the house. Now I was just biding my time. When Trina wasn't around, Susan always mentioned her lovers, as if challenging me. She just couldn't calm down. I knew I shouldn't have let it get to me, but it still hurt. On Halloween night, I dressed Trina up in her princess costume. She looked so beautiful. Sam arrived in her military uniform, and I must say I have never seen a more handsome soldier. I gave them both candy bags, and they went home to get some candy. I stayed on our porch handing out candy to ghosts, goblins, and other kids in colorful costumes. About an hour and a half later, my two candy collectors returned with full bags. Sam said Trina was almost winded. We turned off the porch light since most of the kids had finished their walks, and Sam helped Trina take off her suit. I made us all popcorn, poured us a glass of apple cider, and we decided to watch the TV series Heroes. It was a show about a group of people with superpowers. Some could read minds, some could not die, one woman could freeze everything, and some could even travel through time. I told Sam that I had recently started watching the show and watched it often with Trina. Of course, Trina always fell asleep, and I ended up watching it myself. It was so nice to have Sam by my side. It felt like family, but Sam was just a good friend and adopted sister. Finally, the day came when our divorce was finalized and life moved on. I really enjoyed my time with Trina. At that moment, she was the meaning of my life. By the way, right after Trina was born, I took a DNA test. She truly was my daughter. I never told Susan I did this test. I must say that there was a bad side to my life. I knew about Joe, Warren, and Brad. I believed there were many others, but I did not know their names. This is probably for the best. Deep down, I wanted to take revenge, but I didn't know how to do it. Every time I saw one of these bastards, they would giggle and laugh at me. I thought it would embarrass Trina, but she never said anything. I knew I had to get revenge somehow, but how? I saw Sam every day when I came to work. She was one of the highlights of my days. Since the divorce was finalized, Sam and I have become even closer in the office. She did everything for me. It seemed that she was becoming my personal secretary. She made appointments for me and attracted many random clients. One day, when I brought Trina to work, she and Sam were chatting. When I returned from the office, Trina asked me if Sam could come with us to dinner and a movie. Princess, Sam probably already has plans. No, I don't have any plans, Sam said, smiling. She may not like pizza and children's movies. I love pizza and I love cartoons, Sam continued to smile. What could I say? I think these two already planned everything in advance. I agreed on a time and told Sam that we would pick her up. We had a great time. I liked being with an adult, especially Sam, and she and Trina got along great. On the way home, I said, we should do this again someday. Trina looked at Sam and said, tomorrow night, Dad and I will make popcorn and watch Heroes together. Would you like to join? I was about to come up with an excuse, but Sam spoke first. I'd love to come and watch TV with you and your dad. I was very happy about this, but I knew that I had to control my emotions around Sam. We were just friends, and she trusted me. I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize our relationship. About halfway through the show, Trina fell asleep. Sam looked at me and asked what I was thinking. She said I had a stupid smile on my face. I thought that if I had superpowers, I could get rid of those bastards who ruined my marriage and made me a weak person. Mark, you won, let it go. You have a wonderful daughter, a good job, and a comfortable home, Sam said. I know you're right, but I can't forget how I get made fun of every time I see those bastards. If I had superpowers, I would take revenge. And what kind of power would you like? Sam asked, keeping up the conversation. I don't know, maybe the ability to make things happen to them, like having Warren freeze to death in his freezer at work, or for a barbell to fall on Brad and crush his throat. You only think about the bad, Mark. This is not good. How about something good? She smiled at me. I had good thoughts. I wanted to kiss and make love to Sam, but I knew it was impossible. Some thoughts I had to keep to myself. Sam stood up to leave, thanked me for the invitation, and told me to kiss Trina for her. I hugged her and walked her to the door. The next morning, we were woken up by a thunderstorm. I collected Trina and took her to school and then drove to the office. As I was getting out of the car, lightning struck right next to me. I don't think it hit me, but it hit me against the car and I hit my head. I woke up in a hospital room. Sam stood over me. What's happened? I asked. I remember seeing lightning and falling. Judging by what the doctors said, you fell and hit your head on a car. You have a concussion. They did an MRI and you'll be fine, but you'll have to spend the night in the hospital, Sam replied. What about Trina? I asked. I'll pick her up from school and bring her to you. She can spend the night at my place if you don't mind. Of course I don't mind. I trust you completely. Damn, my head feels weird. Well, of course, you hit your head and got a concussion. Don't worry, the doctors said that in a couple of days you will be as good as new. There was something else, but I didn't want to tell Sam. I felt like I could do something special, like I had a superpower. I wondered if I could impose my will on people. I know I shouldn't have done this, but I mentally wished for Sam to kiss me. Okay, I have to go back to the office. Take care of yourself and listen to the doctors. She leaned over and kissed me. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that your old friend from college came into the office this morning. He said he would come here to see you. She kissed me again and left. I began to wonder if I had a superpower. She actually kissed me when I wanted her to. I wonder who might come and see me. I fell asleep, but woke up to find my old friend Tony DeMarco from college standing next to me. He said he was in Ohio on business and decided to stop by to see him. We chatted about old times, and I thanked him for helping me have sexual encounters in college. We both laughed, and he asked me about Susan. I told him about her infidelity and our divorce. He said that the only good thing I got from this marriage was a beautiful daughter. He mentioned that he has 3 children and is happily married. Before he left, he reminded me that if I ever needed help, I could count on him. I thought about asking him to deal with a couple of my old enemies, but I could never ask that of a friend. The memory of Warren laughing at me flashed through my head again. He stood right in front of me 2 days ago and told his friends that he recently slept with my ex. God, how I wanted to hit him then. While I was thinking about revenge, Trina and Sam came into the room. "Hey, princess, how was your day at school?" "Okay, Dad. Sam said you were struck by lightning and hit your head. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I hope that tomorrow I will be discharged from the hospital," I replied. "Sam will take me to my grandmother, but then he will take me to his place. It's a pity you can't come with us." This made me smile. I'd love to spend the night at Sam's. I looked at her and perhaps mentally wished that she would think the same thing. I had to stop doing that. If Sam and I get together, I want it to be because she wants to be with me, not because I want her to. The doctor insisted that I stay in the hospital one more day. There was no point in arguing with him. Besides, Sam said it would be better this way. When she came closer to me and looked into my eyes, I could not resist and mentally wished for one more kiss and received it. "Mark, I need to tell you something. This is personal, but I think you should know," Sam said. "What is it, Sam?" She looked a little nervous. She asked Trina to wait for her in the corridor. "I didn't tell you the whole truth, and I have to confess to you." "What do you want to say?" "Before I was discharged from the army, I was sent to a psychiatric ward for 2 months. I'm not crazy, but I wounded 2 soldiers with a knife." "You don't have to tell me that, Sam." "No, it's necessary. Please let me finish. We were at a bar, and the guys started getting too drunk and got too drunk. I asked them to stop several times, but they didn't listen. The others stood and laughed. I was able to stand up for myself. The next thing I remember is being arrested by military police and sent to a psychiatric ward, where I spent 2 months. All the soldiers sided with the attackers and said that it was all just a joke, and I became aggressive. It was attributed to some kind of disorder. I just wanted you to know the truth about my past. I'm so sorry for you. You deserve so much better. Thank you for trusting me." I wondered if I had somehow influenced her openness. I knew I needed to learn to control my desires. After she left, I thought about her, Tony, and Warren, and soon fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken up by Trina and Sam. "Dad, you are being discharged today. Sam and I will take you to breakfast. We're going to McDonald's." Not my favorite place to eat, but the company was good. While we ate, Trina told me about everything she had done in the last 2 days. She said she slept with Sam in her big bed. I laughed when she said I should sleep there too. I think she just didn't think it would be weird, but I liked the idea. When I returned home, I started reading the newspaper. I noticed Warren from the grocery store was found frozen in his freezer. Apparently, the mechanism for opening the door from the inside did not work, and he froze to death. The article stated that there was no suspicion of criminality. It was just an accident. My father called and asked if I was okay. He was away and couldn't visit me in the hospital. When I said everything was fine, he asked me to go to the grocery store where Warren worked and make an insurance claim. Apparently, Warren was insured with us. Some people looked at me strangely when I filled out the paperwork. Everyone knew how Warren bragged about sleeping with my ex. They were probably wondering if I was somehow involved in his death. They didn't know that I wanted it. I told Sam about how I wished for this, and that I told her about it last week. In a sense, I killed Warren. "Mark, it was an accident. Just because you thought about it doesn't make you guilty," Sam said. "Sam, you don't understand. I'm not sad about what happened. He was a creep and an asshole, and I don't feel any regret that he froze to death. I just wonder how this could happen. If you believe that you have some kind of magical power, then use it for good. Wish you more sales and a better life," Sam replied. The next week, I closed all my trades that Sam arranged for me. Every time before entering a house, I mentally wished that people would buy insurance. I also sold 2 houses that week. I was happy, Dad was happy, and so was Sam. Life was going great until I ran into Brad. I had a meeting about staging a house for sale. When I arrived, No one answered the door for several minutes. I rang the doorbell again, and a pretty woman in a robe answered the door. I'm Mark Royer. We made an appointment to sign documents for the sale of the house. I have a sign with me to put on your lawn. Sorry, I completely lost track of time. Can I sign the documents and you can put a sign on the lawn? You can take photos of the outside, but for the photos of the inside, I'll ask you to come back later when I've got everything in order. No problem. I'll send someone tomorrow to take photos of the inside. I went outside and started taking some pictures. That's when I noticed a car parked across the street. It was Brad's car. I knew her too well because she often stood outside my house. He was probably inside sleeping with Mrs. Diaz. Sam said this woman was getting a divorce and wanted to sell her house. I wondered if Brad was the reason for her divorce, just as he was the reason for the destruction of my marriage. Old Brad not only cheated on his wife Jill, but also on Susan. I couldn't resist calling Susan to see if she'd pick Trina up for the weekend, but what I really wanted to tell her was that I'd seen Brad's car. I knew I only saw his car, but that was enough for me. 2 days later, Brad was found dead in his gym. Apparently, he was working out on a machine and the scales were too heavy. Police launched an investigation as it did not appear to be just an accident. They came to me for questioning, but I had an excellent alibi. I was with Trina at a school play. Unfortunately, her mother could not come. I wondered if I had a hand in what happened to him. I was pretty sure it was my will, but I hoped it wasn't Jill who was somehow involved. She deserved better. I remembered Sam saying that he wanted Brad dead that way. I now realized that I should have controlled my thoughts better. Police have not yet ruled out murder, although it could have been an accident. My sales improved significantly and life with Trina was going great. Sam became more and more a part of our lives. Every time I went somewhere with Trina, she always asked if Sam could come with us. I was confused by my thoughts and feelings. Did I instill in Trina these emotions towards Sam? Did Sam want to spend time with us because of my desires? Believe it or not, this part was starting to annoy me. I wanted the three of us to be together because we wanted it, not because I wished it. I needed to go to a new construction site. Several construction companies worked there, and I handled insurance policies for developers. I needed to check each construction company and get the necessary insurance documents from them. As luck would have it, I came across a company where Joe Akers worked. He was the same Uncle Joe that Trina saw with my ex-wife. He laughed as I walked by, and that laugh made me feel like nothing again. If only people knew what it was like to be a laughing stock. I approached him when he was alone and said, "I will sentence you to death. Just like Warren and Brad, now it's your turn. Laugh at it, you bastard." He looked completely dumbfounded when I left. I was sure that he had read about the deaths in the newspapers and knew about my divorce. Now he clearly had something to think about. Later, I received a call from my friend Tony. He said he would be passing through again and would like to meet for lunch. We met, chatted about old times, and he invited me to come to New York for a vacation. He asked if I was seeing anyone, and I said there was one woman I was interested in, but nothing serious. I mentioned Sam, and he commented that it sounded pretty serious. He asked how I was coping after the divorce, knowing that it had been difficult for me as I was humiliated and felt betrayed. I told him that 2 of the guys Susan cheated with were already dead. "Well, maybe the third one will follow soon," Tony joked, laughing. "By the way, invite this woman Sam to New York. Bring your daughter and my wife will be happy to show you the city." That evening I called Sam and told her what Joe said. Mentioned that I was tired of being the butt of ridicule, so I told him that I had sentenced him. I then added that it might be worth adding Susan to the list. "Mark, you need to stop this. I'm worried about you. As for Susan, she's your daughter's mother. You can't hurt her." "So what did you tell Joe?" Sam asked. "That it's his turn now. I don't know how this will happen. I haven't really wanted it yet." "Stop it, Mark. You can't live like this. Please, for my sake," Sam said with genuine concern. I wasn't sure what she meant. I could never be sure whether her thoughts were really hers or whether I was instilling them. I changed the subject and asked if she wanted to go on vacation to New York. My friend Tony invited us, and he would show us around the city. She immediately agreed. Of course, I began to wonder again whether this was her own desire or whether I had instilled it in her. I didn't like this power anymore. I was glad that I got rid of the villains, but what about my relationship with Sam? Were they real, or was it all the result of my desires? I had an evening meeting, so I took Trina to your parents. After I signed the papers, I was driving back into town when another car hit me. The next thing I remember is that I woke up in the hospital again. Once again, Sam sat next to my father. What's happened? It seems like a car drove into me. How long have I been unconscious? The father spoke first. You were in a coma for 3 days. Sam, your mom, and I took turns watching with you. What about Trina? Is she okay? I asked. She's fine, but she's worried about you, Sam replied. So do we all. She lives with your mother. We didn't want to bring her to the hospital while you were unconscious. We will bring her to you this afternoon, said the father. I think you want to tell me something else? Is there something you're keeping quiet about for now? I asked, feeling that they were hiding something. The father spoke again. I thought it could wait, but since you asked. Joe Akers was killed the same night your accident happened. The police were looking for you, but of course they realized it wasn't you because you were in a coma in the hospital. Killed? How? Where? I asked. I saw him a few days ago at a construction site. That's why the police were looking for you. I think he told his friends that he slept with Susan. Damn, this woman really fooled me, the father said. Sam continued the story. Apparently, his truck caught fire right in front of Susan's apartment. According to the report, he was visiting her, and when he got out and got into the truck, it caught fire. Joe was drunk and didn't have time to get out. I looked at Sam. She knew what I was thinking. I wished for his death, although I don't know how it happened. I don't remember. All I could think about was how a car crashed into me. Sam and father left, but promised to return later and bring Trina. I thought about Sam, but this time there was no kiss. I began to wonder if I had lost my superpower. I felt better and was really hungry. I wanted steak, but got meatloaf. I decided to just test my strength. Mom brought Trina to me at the hospital. I was so glad to see them. I asked about Sam, and Mom said she was busy with work. She could do everything except sign legal documents. You really care about Sam, don't you, Mark? It's noticeable every time she's around, the mother said. Sorry, Mom. You have nothing to apologize for. She is a wonderful person, and we love her. She was an adopted daughter, not your sister, so there's nothing wrong with you falling in love with her, Mom smiled. But Mom, I don't know how she feels. We never talked about this. She gets along so well with Trina. I love Sam, Trina said. She is beautiful and kind to me. She treats me even better than my mother. I think she loves you too, Dad. Why do you think that, Princess? I asked Trina. Just because of the way she acts around you and always agrees to come with us when you invite her, Trina replied. I began to think that perhaps all this was not happening of my own free will. Apparently, having strength is not always good. The doctors said that I would be discharged after lunch. Mom called the office and told Dad that she and Trina would stay with me and take me home. That night, Sam came over to our house to watch Heroes with us. She made us some popcorn, and we all sat on the couch to watch the show. As usual, Trina fell asleep, and Sam carried her to bed. When she came back into the room, I started blinking my eyes. What are you doing, Mark? Are your eyes okay? Do you want me to call a doctor? After all, you had another concussion. No, I just wanted to check if I had lost my powers. I thought I lost them in the hospital. And what were you trying to do? You've already gotten rid of 3 men you wanted to take revenge on. At the hospital, I tried to get me a steak, Sam laughed. And now, when you entered the room, I tried. What were you trying to do? Sam asked with a smile. I can't say, it confuses me. Come on, you can trust me, Sam said. I tried to get you to kiss me. I looked into her eyes. She looked back at me. I couldn't understand what she was thinking. If you wanted it, all you had to do was ask. She leaned over and kissed me. Mark, I was waiting for you. I wasn't sure about your feelings and didn't want to ruin our relationship. I've been taking care of you since I came back to town. That's why I told you about my past. I even kissed you in the hospital, but you didn't kiss me back. That's because I thought the only reason you kissed me was because I forced you. I want you to kiss me because you want to. Then why didn't you suggest that we make love? For the same reason. I wanted you to want to be with me because of who I am, not because I forced you. So that means you no longer have the power, right? Sam asked. It's true, I replied. All strength has disappeared. Then take me to your bedroom and make love to me. I really want this. I took her hand and led her to my bedroom. When it was over, Sam turned to me, looked me in the eyes and whispered, I love you, Mark. I smiled and replied, I love you too, Sam. Now I'm sure it's real. We hugged each other and spent the rest of the night in each other's arms without saying too many words. Everything that needed to be said was already expressed through our touches and glances. The next morning, I was the first to wake up. The warm rays of the sun penetrated through the curtains, illuminating the bedroom with a soft light. Sam was still sleeping. Her face was calm. She looked so happy. I watched her for a few minutes, feeling at peace. Everything seemed in its place. I got up, took a shower, and returned to the bedroom, where Sam was already starting to wake up. Good morning, she said with a slight smile, stretching. Good morning, I replied. You look great. She laughed. After a night like this, it's impossible to look bad. We prepared breakfast together and sat down at the table. A few minutes later, Trina came into the kitchen, yawning and rubbing her eyes. Hi, Dad. Hello, Sam. Are you staying the night with us again? She asked, as if it were the most ordinary thing. Sam calmly replied, Yes, it was too late for me to go home. Trina just smiled, grabbed a bowl of cereal, and sat down with us at the table as if nothing unusual had happened. These quiet family morning moments filled me with joy and gratitude that life was finally starting to get better. I knew Sam had become an important part of our lives, not just a good friend, but something more. I was happy that now I could love her openly without any doubts. Everything was going well at work, too. Sam and I worked side by side, and every day I came to appreciate her more, both professionally and personally. Life was getting better, and my strengths, which I had once considered something incredible, no longer seemed so important to me. Now I understand that real miracles happen when you are honest with yourself and your feelings. One evening, after another long day of work, as Sam and I were getting ready to go home, I heard a voice that I had not wanted to hear for a long time. It was Susan. She flew into the office like a hurricane, her face full of anger. Where is Mark? I want to talk to him right now, she shouted, walking past Sam and heading straight to my office. She slammed the door and started talking. I know that you were somehow involved in the death of my lovers. I don't know how, but I will prove it. You will not escape punishment. She never knew about my powers, which are now gone. If I could have wished for her death earlier, perhaps I would have done so. But now it didn't matter. I had nothing to do with the deaths of your former lovers, Susan. In fact, I spoke to the police after each death. During 2 of them, I was in the hospital. During one, I was even in a coma. So you'll have to come up with a better explanation to pin this on me. Susan looked at me stubbornly. I know it's you, but I don't know how, she said, clenching her fists in anger. Get out of my office, or I'll call security. You were a mistake in my life. The only good thing I got from our marriage was Trina. If I wanted anyone to die, it would be yours. When Susan left my office, she slammed the door furiously. In the corridor, I heard her arguing with Sam. This did not bode well, but Sam, as always, remained calm. Listen, Susan, leave Mark alone. You've hurt him enough already. If you want trouble, you'll get it. Here, look at this, Sam said, handing Susan the envelope. When Susan opened it, inside were photographs of her with various men. "Where did you get these photos?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. "It doesn't matter. Let's just say they ended up on my desk. They capture all your infidelities with your lovers. Pay attention to the date and time stamped on each photo. You were the last person to see Warren, Brad, and Joe before they died," Sam explained calmly. Susan began to panic. "Who took these photos? You. Did you set them up? You know who killed them, right? I will show these photos to the police." Sam just smiled and replied, "If I were you, I'd think twice about showing those photos to the police. Have you ever heard of the Black Widow? She kills her partners after sex. Maybe you killed your lovers yourself. After all, you were the last one to see them alive." Susan tried to threaten. "I'll tell the police that you gave me these photos. I wear gloves, so there are no prints. I just found them on my desk. Besides, I have never dated these men, so you better leave Mark alone and stop accusing us of murder." Susan began to mutter something about Larry, her last lover, but Sam calmly continued, "You better leave town, Susan. Maybe this will save your life." A week later, Susan actually called and said that she had been transferred to another branch on the other side of the state. She asked to see Trina before she left, and I agreed, setting a mutually agreeable time frame for her future visits. After that, Sam and I's peace was restored, and our lives went on as usual. A week after speaking with Susan, I received a call from her. She said she was being transferred to another branch of the company on the other side of the state and planned to leave soon. She asked to meet Trina before leaving. We agreed on a time to meet and discussed the possibility of future visits, especially on holidays and weekends. When I told Sam about this, she smiled, clearly pleased. "Mark, I knew Susan would give in. I overheard your conversation on the phone. I hope you're not mad at me," she said, looking into my eyes with a mischievous smile. "No, I'm not mad, Sam. On the contrary, I'm glad that you were honest with me. You and Trina are the most important thing in my life, and I just want you to know that," I replied with sincerity in my voice. Sam smiled even wider and kissed me tenderly. "I know, Mark, and I will do everything to make you happy. We will get through this together," she said, filling me with a sense of confidence in our shared future. A month passed and Sam and I got married. It was one of the happiest days of my life. Trina was almost as happy as I was. My parents did not hide their joy and were grateful that Sam and I had found each other. We had a small ceremony among close friends and family and then headed off to New York for our honeymoon as planned. Tony and his wife hosted us and allowed us to stay in their luxurious home. They showed us New York, took us to attractions, restaurants, and even spent a night on Broadway. Trina was with us on all our daytime outings and stayed with Tony's kids in the evenings, so we could enjoy our evening outings. Before we got home, Tony told me, "Don't forget, Mark, if you ever need anything, just call. I'm always there." I thanked him, knowing that I had a reliable friend. After returning home, life returned to normal, but she became much happier. Trina visits Susan periodically, but we no longer have any problems with my ex-wife. Sam and I are enjoying our new life together. Susan continues to regularly send us monthly payments to support Trina, and we have agreed on regular visits for our daughter to her mother. As for the deaths of Susan's former lovers, they remain unsolved. But now it doesn't matter anymore. My past was left behind, and I looked forward to the future with joy with the woman I loved and my daughter. My life has completely changed. I was no longer the weakling that Susan once thought I was. Now I have a wonderful family, true love and confidence in the future. Sam and I were happy, and I knew that only better days lay ahead. Trina grew up a happy and smart child. She adored Sam and always looked forward to our time together, and although she still had meetings with her mother, I was sure that our family would always remain first for her. Life went on, and I was grateful for everything it gave me. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the